Okay, hear me out. Just to play devil's advocate here. As an organization, you would think that demons would have addressed this whole "if you know my name, you have dominion over me" problem. At the very least, aren't they supposed to be good liars? If I'm a demon out here haunting shit and some holy person, exorcist or whomever runs up on me and is like, "Yo, tell me your name, demon," I'd be like, Steve? Or better yet, I'd give them the name of the demon that still owes me $20. You won't catch me being banished back to hell for being honest. That seems very undemon-like. I'm Brandon O. This is Terrorific, and we're chopping up 2016's The Conjuring 2. Here we are at the Horrible Host and Haunted House Guest Season 2 finale, and I had to save the best for last. The Conjuring 2 is my favorite horror movie. Nothing scared me more than watching it in theaters that very first time. The jump scares were relentless. I went into it with no knowledge of anything. I hadn't seen a trailer, hadn't seen any still images, hadn't read any reviews or articles. I went in just off of pure vibes based on watching the first one and James Wan's other films. So let's dive in. The Conjuring 2 is based on the true story of London's Enfield haunting experienced by the Hodgson family in 1977. The family consisted of mom Peggy, kids Margaret, Janet, Johnny, and Billy. No dad in the picture because apparently he ran off and had twins with the neighbor, which is pretty awkward. But I hope they at least sold the house and moved away. Like, imagine walking around your neighborhood and you see your dad with his new kids and he just gives you a head nod or the friendly neighbor wave. And the new kids are like, "Daddy, who's that?" And he's just like, "Shit, I don't know, just being polite." Nasty work. But one of the things that I really like about The Conjuring 2 is that you don't have to wait very long for shit to start popping off. It's almost instantaneous. And once the paranormal stuff happens, Janet finds herself at the center of it. And it all starts when Janet is asleep in bed and suddenly she wakes up on the floor downstairs next to an old leather rocking chair in the corner. And I really like how the scene was edited. They made it look like Janet was turning over in bed, and in one relatively seamless transition, there's a semi-subtle thud and the camera zooms out to show her on the ground. And Janet is confused as to what's just happened. She thinks that she's been sleepwalking. And from there, things ramp up pretty quickly. The next night, Janet and Margaret are asleep in the room they share, but Margaret is awakened by Janet talking in her sleep. She appears to be having a bad dream, and she starts speaking in two different voices as if she's having a conversation. Her own and another that's deeper and sounds like she's impersonating a man. Now, the male voice begins to threaten the whole family. He says something about breaking Peggy's neck because they're trespassing in his house. Like, damn, bro, chill, who hurt you? But Janet and Margaret can't have all the fun. Biscuit Boy Billy also wants in on the action. Now, Billy is obsessed with biscuits, or as we call them in good old America, cookies. So Peggy brings him a plate up to his room and says, "Don't eat too many before bed or else you'll wake up thirsty in the middle of the night." But Billy is 7, so obviously he eats every single cookie on this plate. Now, I'm also a parent to 4 children, and bro, this scene had me stressed. First of all, food in the bedroom? Hell nah. Secondly, cookies before bed? Hell nah. On top of that, cookies in bed? Hell nah. That boy's about to be swimming in ants. But of course, what Billy's mom told him would happen happens, and he wakes up thirsty as hell in the middle of the night. So he heads downstairs to get some water. And while he's walking back to the stairs, he passes that leather rocking chair in the corner, and this time there is a man sitting in it. You only see him for a few seconds, but it's mad creepy. But Biscuit Boy doesn't even notice. He's probably too busy thinking about how he's gonna have the squirts once those 14 cookies digest. But he continues his way upstairs and stubs his toe on a toy fire truck at the top. He then rolls that fire truck into a little tent that's over in the corner, and he walks back down the hall to his room, gets in bed, tucks himself in, and right when he's about to put his head down on the pillow, the fire truck slowly rolls over to his room. And now Billy's like, well, yo, alright, that's a little weird, but also intriguing. So his silly ass gets out of bed, grabs the truck, and walks back over to the tent. And there he decides to conduct a little experiment. He rolls the truck back inside, which is of course obscured by shadows, and someone or something rolls it back out. And then suddenly there's this loud ass disembodied scream that comes wailing from the tent, and finally Billy is like, okay, maybe this wasn't such a great idea. And he goes running to his mommy. Well, Peggy then hears something coming from downstairs, and she goes to investigate. She finds Janet sitting asleep in that leather rocking chair in the corner. What is up with this chair? And shortly after this, one of my all-time favorite jump scares occurs. Like, the setup didn't tip their hand at all, in my opinion. Janet is home alone after not going to school due to being sick, and she's watching TV. And the channel starts to change on its own. Janet's like, well, that's strange. And so she starts looking for the remote, but she can't find it. She's looking everywhere on the couch, and it was right next to her. Not anymore. She turns around and it ends up being in that rocking chair. So now clearly something is really, really wrong with this chair. All of a sudden the TV antenna loses signal and the screen goes black. When Janet goes to fix it, she sees a man sitting in the chair in the screen's reflection. And now this is where the jump scare comes in, because the camera alternates between a slow zoom on Janet's face and a slow zoom on the chair. You're not sure which direction to expect the scare from, or at least I wasn't. And then the old man pops up behind Janet yelling, "My house!" And boy, when I first saw this in the theater, let me tell you, it's me and 3 other people. We get to the theater late, so the only seats available are in the very first row. And so we're right there in the action. So as this camera zooms in on Janet and zooms in on the chair, like I feel like it's zooming in on me. Like I'm like right there. And so an old dude pops up yelling, it's so loud. He's right in my face. I have never, even still to this day, jumped as hard or tensed up as strongly as I have when this scene first happened. My back was like wet, like I was sweating, I was stressing, bro. Classic. But what is making this man's spirit so restless? This is now at least the 2nd time that he's complained about people being in his house. Why is he unable to move on to the afterlife? The film lays some Easter eggs that answer this question, and they probably go unnoticed to anyone who isn't either an expert in the occult and or demonology, or someone doing a rewatch. Towards the beginning of the 2nd act, Ed and Lorraine Warren start to become more central to the story, so we get a scene of them at their house. It's early in the morning, and Lorraine awakens to find Ed already in the living room, and he's painting something. He says he couldn't sleep because he had a crazy dream and he saw this thing and he couldn't get it out of his head once he woke up, so he decided to paint it. And what he produced was an image of the now iconic demon nun. And this is the same demon nun that Lorraine saw in the opening scene of the film while they were investigating the Amityville haunting. So she recognizes that this seems a little bit dangerous. At this point we don't yet know the demon nun's name, but that's where the Easter eggs come into play. As Ed and Lorraine sit in the kitchen having a conversation, the letters V, A, L, A, K appear in 2 separate places. When the camera is focused on Ed, you can see them to his right, and when the camera is focused on Lorraine, you can see them to her left. But Lorraine tells Ed that they need to stop doing all this ghost stuff. They can still do lectures, but they don't need to take on any new cases, at least for a little while. And Ed understandably asks why, says that if it's because of the publicity and all the TV appearances, and they can stop doing those. But Lorraine just asks him to trust her. For me, I don't know if trust me would suffice. If my wife is asking me to stop doing what I love, what we both love, I think we need to have more of a conversation about it. But Ed just says, all right. And then we get another Easter egg. We see Lorraine sitting in the living room with her daughter Judy, and there's a bookcase in the background. And on this bookcase, there are 5 bookends that spell out V-A-L-A-K again. And we get the official intro of Valak. Now, as far as horror history goes, or at least as far as modern horror history goes, this has to rank like in the top 5, at worst top 10 of just like all-time great scenes, great scares. It's perfectly executed. It's unique, but above all, it's just genuinely scary, especially if you're sitting in the very front row at a movie theater. But during this interaction, Lorraine asks the demon, "Who are you, and what do you want?" So, who is Valak? According to texts like the Lesser Key of Solomon, Valak is a demon described as a boy with angelic wings who rides around on a 2-headed dragon. Powers include locating hidden treasures and commanding 30 legions of lesser demons and spirits. Valak is obviously not depicted as a little boy with angel wings on a 2-headed dragon in this film, so at least in the Conjuring universe, Valak's powers also include shape-shifting. But what treasures are being sought? I think Valak is after the things that are most important to the protagonist, 2 characters in particular. Like in the first Conjuring, the demon's primary targets in this film are the mothers, Lorraine and Peggy. In the first film, Bathsheba took the direct approach by tormenting and possessing Carolyn herself, but in The Conjuring 2, Valak is taking the indirect route by targeting what the mothers value or treasure the most. For Lorraine, the 2 most important things to her are her faith and her husband. Sorry Judy, no room left for daughters. Now, I'm gonna go out of chronological order for a second. There's a scene in the film when the Warrens are meeting the Hodgsons for the first time. Janet is sitting outside on the swings looking all sullen. I mean, I guess having the ghost of an old man use your body as a microphone does kinda suck. But Lorraine goes out there to join her. And she tells her that she can relate to how it feels dealing with these paranormal things that no one else around you seems to understand. Because that's how it was for her. And at long last, she finally found one person who believed what she was experiencing, and she says that one person can change everything. And she ended up marrying that guy. So good old Valak decides to show Lorraine visions of Ed being impaled by a huge, jagged tree trunk. Kind of a dick move. And then Valak also takes the form of a nun in an effort to mock, corrupt, and ultimately destroy Lorraine's Catholic faith. Meanwhile, for Peggy, apparently Janet is her favorite child. Isn't Peggy typically a nickname for Margaret? So her eldest daughter is basically Peggy Jr., but that's still not enough to be the favorite child, which I guess in this case isn't necessarily a bad thing because now you're not getting taken over by ghosts. So congratulations on being loved less by your mom. But let's get back in chronological order. How did the Warrens come to cross paths with the Hodgsons? Well, a TV crew comes to their house for an interview, and during this interview, Janet gets possessed. And she's speaking as a man named Bill Wilkins. He says that this was his house until he died one day while sitting in that leather rocking chair in the corner of the living room. Now, back in the States, the father from the first Conjuring film meets up with the Warrens and he plays them a recording of Janet's possession during this interview. And he asks them what they make of the recording, and they say something like, "Oh man, that poor old man sounds so confused." And the father tells them super dramatically, "That voice is coming from an 11-year-old girl." And their jaws drop and they're completely shook. The father says that the church has been reluctant to get involved because the case has turned into a media circus. They're calling it England's Amityville. And Lorraine asks if they're afraid it's a hoax, and the father says the church's ability to help people depends on its reputation. What an interesting way to frame that. So, reputation matters more than helping people who are desperately reaching out to you. It's kind of cold-blooded. But in his defense, I guess he knows that the church's power is tangible, as we all do, but he also knows that the power is propped up by something wholly intangible, and that's belief. If the church endorses an exorcism for a haunting that turns out to be a hoax, then it damages the legitimacy and integrity of the church and the Bible's teachings. That makes total sense logically, but also from a logical perspective, wouldn't refusing to help someone also damage your reputation and ability to help people? Is the goal to help people, or is it to only help those who believe in what you're selling? But Father wants the Warrens to fly to London for 3 days to act as the church's eyes and ears. Now Ed wants to go, he's down from the jump, but Lorraine is still like, nah, fuck that. She tells him about the premonition that she had about his death, and that the demon nun from his painting is real. She thinks that Ed having a dream about the demon is a warning that if they pursue this case, he will die. But he says that Lorraine's visions are a gift from God, and if God is showing them to her, then maybe she's meant to prevent his death from happening. And she eats that shit up. She says, alright, they can go, but only if he promises that if things get too crazy, they'll stop, alert the church, and get out of there. And he promises. But boy, she folded like origami, huh? All he had to do was just hype her up, say, hey girl, you can save my life. And she's like, fuck it, let's do it then, babe. So the Warrens pull up in London. Lorraine goes out and has her conversation with Janet on the swings while Ed gets a tour of the house. And the Hodgson's family's neighbors, they have done the 1970s equivalent of texting prayer hand emojis. They've donated a bunch of crucifixes to him, like dozens. And Penny has hung every single one of them up on the walls in Janet and Margaret's room, as it sees the most paranormal activity in the house. And she's also put a big ass lock on the door. So now it's time to prove if this haunting is legit or not. The Warrens and Peggy try to summon Bill through Janet. So Ed has Janet hold water in her mouth as proof to the church that she isn't using some sort of ventriloquist trick. And Janet spits the water out to tell them that Bill won't speak if they're all staring, so they turn around and they continue the process, and that brings Bill out. Bill starts talking to Ed about the afterlife and says he isn't a heaven man, and Ed says, I've got news for you. I don't care what you believe in. And then he holds out a crucifix to him. Man's really said the quiet part out loud, like, hey buddy, you're gonna get some of this Jesus whether you like it or not. Which I'm sure really hit home for some people who saw this. But Bill seemingly appearing and speaking to the group is not solid enough evidence since their backs were turned. So they decide they need video equipment to capture something more concrete. Now considering this all started with the TV interview, you would think they would have already had footage or at least kept the equipment on hand. But while the local assistants gather everything, the Warrens proclaim that they will spend time with Peggy and the kids because they need to be a family again. How ironic is it that people who leave their own daughter at home time and time again, a home, by the way, that has literally an entire room dedicated to haunted and dangerous artifacts that their daughter already got in trouble with in the first Conjuring. They leave her at home to go around gallivanting around the country, around the globe, fighting demons and shit. But now they're concerned about the family unit. Yeah, okay, Chief. It's pretty funny that even in a fictional universe, Americans are still inserting themselves in foreign affairs while sweeping their own problems under the rug. But man, Ed really embraces his role as new daddy. He sings a cringy Elvis cover, he starts doing odd jobs around the house like fixing the kitchen sink, fixing closet doors, even offering to fix the washing machine that's flooded the basement. Bro is going all out. Judy's probably at home thinking to herself, man, I wish my dad was here to sing to me. Honestly though, how long does it take to find some video equipment? This dude has time to fix up the entire house while they're trying to just find a camera. But I digress. As mentioned earlier, Valak has the ability to control legions of lesser demons and spirits, so after some more jump scares and generally spooky stuff, Ed and Lorraine deduce that Bill Wilkins' spirit is being controlled by Valak. He is being used as a pawn to weaken Janet's spirit, and the time comes for Valak to finally make its big move. Janet gets like super possessed, not just a microphone, but a full-on demonic eyes, levitation, telekinesis, and eventually she locks everyone out of the house. Ed is able to get in through the basement, but the door seals behind him and he gets separated from Lorraine. And she is begging him to wait for her while a neighbor goes to get an axe to chop the door down, because remember, he promised that if things got hairy or went sideways, they would report their findings and retreat to safety. But now he's like, sorry, I can't wait because I have to help Janet. I know I made you a promise, but I gotta do this. So he continues through the house and proceeds to get his ass thoroughly kicked. There's like a pipe that breaks and sprays hot ass steam in his eyes. He gets like partially blinded. He looks all kinds of fucked up. But he manages to make his way to possess Janet as she prepares to leap out of the window onto that same jagged tree trunk that Lorraine had been seeing in her visions. He catches her in heroic fashion right as she begins to fall, and he clings to a curtain to keep them both from falling, but it's starting to break under their combined weight. And then right in the nick of time, Lorraine comes busting into the room to save them, and she comes face to face with Valak. Ends up restrained, and it looks like all hope is lost. But Lorraine recalls something, that knowing a demon's name gives you dominion over them. And for some reason, Valak has told her its name. Whenever it showed Lorraine visions of Ed being impaled by the tree, Lorraine just straight up asked for its name. Who are you? What do you want? And Valak apparently said, hey, I'm Valak. Nice to meet you. I just don't understand. If you have one major weakness, why are you going to hand it over to the ops willingly? That is crazy. So Lorraine is like, okay, telekinesis ass bitch, I got something for that ass. And she drops its full government name. She's like, Valak, the Defiler, the Profane, the Marquis of Snakes. I banish you back to hell. And Valak's like, oh shit, no, please. And disappears back to hell. Congratulations, you played yourself. And right when the curtain breaks completely, Lorraine manages to grab hold of Ed with one hand and quite literally single-handedly pulls the combined weight of a grown man and preteen to safety. That's got to be what, like maybe 250 pounds? And I can read between the lines here. Her faith banished the demon back to hell. Her faith has given her apparently superhuman strength. They might as well have put this whole sequence on a billboard saying, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. The demon may be defeated, but they're not done yet. Afterwards, they go outside, they're getting checked on by, medical professionals. And Ed and Janet are sitting together, and he takes off his crucifix and he gives it to her. Gives us this whole spiel about how it's kept him safe since he was a kid, and now he wants Janet to have it. And he says that one day, after she grows up, she can find someone else who needs it and give it to them. Ed and Lorraine aren't just any regular demon hunters. They are missionary demon hunters, and now they've recruited Janet into the mission. Go around and keep spreading the good word. And Lorraine is there too, so Janet references her earlier speech about how one person can change everything. Now, on the surface, Lorraine's context was about Ed, and how he believed her ghost shit when no one else would. But now it takes on a deeper meaning. That one person who can change everything is Jesus. And the outcome of meeting that one person who changes everything was marrying them, right? Well, who marries Jesus? Nuns. So I think we have a triple entendre here. One, it's a reference to Valak perverting the image of the nun to try to test or corrupt Lorraine's faith. 2, seems like a PSA to hit up a convent and join the sisterhood. And finally, number 3, I think it's a foreshadowing of the spin-off Nun films that came out afterwards. But wait, there's more, just to keep the triple theme going. Janet says that she now has 2 people who changed everything for her, referring to Ed and Lorraine, but as she says this, her mother comes and sits next to her and hugs her, implying that really she has 3 people looking out for her, aka the Holy Trinity. And that concludes my interpretation of The Conjuring 2's events, and also concludes Season 2 of Terrorific. The show has seen some notable growth throughout the season. I think we've added somewhere in the ballpark of like 400 followers on IG since the season premiere, and 30 to 40 subscribers across YouTube and Spotify. I host the show through Spotify, so they don't tell me how many subscribers are on the other platforms. Kinda selfish, but it's also free, so I'm not going to complain too much. This off-season, I'll be entering my collab era, so keep your eyes and ears open for my guest appearances on shows from some other great indie horror content creators. Be sure to follow along on IG at Terrorific Podcast for updates, teasers on the next season, and more. Thanks for rocking with me through 20 episodes. Fun fact, statistics show that only about 1% of podcasts worldwide make it to the 20 episode mark, so I guess we've reached elite status. Help us continue to grow by recommending the show in general or specific episodes to your friends, neighbors, significant others, and or side pieces, your granny, even your racist uncle who's tired of his other podcasts and looking for one of the good ones. I'm out of here. I'll be back in a couple of months for season 3, but in the meantime, remember, always keep it spooky.